Okay, Elizabeth, there you go.
I do have the microphone for the Zoom people. Okay, you had pictures of various things, yeah? Most of the pictures that the beginning pictures were pictures from the outing, of the waterfowl outing last Sunday. They did find a blue-phased snow goose. I wasn't on the outing, so, but there are two forms of snow geese. One of them is completely white, and this one in the middle is blue-phased, I think. Oh, Anne-Marie Jackson, she's a wonderful photographer, and she's a member of the club now, so we have access to her wonderful pictures.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and these are redheads, yes. A couple of redheads. I don't know how many you saw, Richard. About 5,000 at Presqu'île. Sometimes there are big flocks of them in Coburg Harbor, depends on the day. And ringneck ducks. Those are both male and female ringneck ducks. Also at Presqu'île, I think. Some in Coburg Harbor. And both greater and lesser scaup. So, and they had them together so people could compare the differences between the two of them, because they are a bit tricky, and if you see them from a distance, it can be really difficult. The females are greater, the male is a lesser. Hooded mergansers. These are really pretty ducks. This male doesn't have his crest sitting up as they sometimes do, but they can be any place. Were they in Coburg Grove?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, sorry, Presqu'île, but at the boat launch.
Boat launch at Presqu'île, so they were fairly close to them. And an American widgeon. Yes, very handsome male. A few people have been having killers. Anybody have a killer at their house? Yeah. Yeah, Marina would. Yeah. I don't have one at my house in town, but I've heard one. Yeah. Eastern meadowlark. There, if you are in open areas, pasture fields, hay fields, you might find the meadowlarks. They're coming back now. Yeah. Male and female are alike. And Margaret saw a tree swallow. This bird will be very sorry that it came back quite so soon, particularly tomorrow, because they feed exclusively on flying insects. So I fear for the life of this bird. That's how it happens.
To mute there. That's somebody on.
Oh, Marina says someone isn't. We're hearing your voice, so could you please all mute yourselves, please? Thank you. And a few northern flickers. I think I heard one drumming in my neighborhood. Anybody else have one? Yeah, they're coming. They're back. They migrate. There's one woodpecker that migrates. Yeah. Anybody else have anything interesting that they want to share? Don, you've been up at Garden Hill Pond fairly regularly.
Nice today to see the osprey sitting on the next platform on Highway 28.
Well, osprey is back. So there's a platform on Highway 28 just south of County Road 9, and it's photographed and viewed quite a lot. And there have been several reports of sandhill cranes in the area. probably up around Rice Lake more than any place else, but have you had them?
Our neighbor has 3 in the field for the last couple of weeks.
Ah, okay, so that's on Rice Lake, yeah. Those are amazingly big birds. Have you seen sandhill crowns? They're as tall as I am, yeah. And they're very, very noisy. They're very noisy. You'll hear them before you'll see them for sure. And I've seen photographs of the migration on the Platte River in Nebraska. And it's an aerial photograph and you can't see the ground. There are so many birds and they're big birds. So we're quite excited to have them breeding again in Northumberland County, which they used to. I think they probably nest in Murray Marsh, which is at the northeast corner of the county. Murray Marsh is quite impenetrable in the summertime. Jeff Beaver told me that the only time you can get in there really is in the winter when you can do it on snowshoes, which is saved the marsh. So that's really a nice thing. Anybody else have any? Marina had a redpoll at her place today. Yeah. And there have been very few winter finches around this winter. So we've hardly even had any goldfinches at our house. You've got to, they're all at your house. Yeah. And we had the first song sparrow in the garden this week. Yeah. Yeah, Frank, you got a song sparrow? Anybody else have anything? Yeah, David. Song sparrow, that's just around the corner here. And Frank's is across the street. So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, last week it was out north of Grafton, and there was still snow bunnies around. Actually, there were probably several thousand snow bunnies. There was a huge flock lifted up. The sky was black with someone.
Richard Jordan had a huge flock of snow buntings last week. Was it before the snow went away?
There wasn't any snow on the ground.
No snow. Okay, they won't be here long,
No.
and they'll be turning brown, so you won't be able to see them anymore too. They'll be molting into their breeding plumage. They molt into the white in the winter. So, am I backwards? This time of year they'd be going brown.
It's actually better wear, I think, if they takes on the brown inches off the.
Okay. Yeah, all right, I'm standing corrected. So, what else in March? April, yeah. You have a woodcock. You have 3 in your house. This is south of Grafton? Yeah. So, listen for woodcock at dusk. You have to be in a kind of a wet area, and their courtship display is a high flight, and the wind actually is blowing through their feathers. So they say it's winnowing, and that's the sound that they make, but you have to know what it is. Yeah. So, and for the next little while, all the rest of the sparrows will be coming back. Before I see you again, the very first early warblers might be back. Yeah. But everything's changing these days, so keep your eyes and ears open.
Will the Baltimore Orioles also be back?
Baltimore Orioles probably May. You can look.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We've had a couple of outings since our last meeting. The first was on March the 8th, March the 4th, rather, to the Canoe Museum in Peterborough, led by Tom Jackman. What a wonderful day that was. 14 members and guests attended and enjoyed an immersive visit to the museum, or the history, the form, and the beauty of these vessels. It's just it just evoked a lot of memories for a lot of people who were participating, and going back to the days when we were out there paddling. and, and enjoying sleeping on rocks. This past Sunday on March 23rd, we had a waterfowl outing led by Roger Frost. What a wonderful day. Sunny, cool, but it was so beautiful. There was no wind. Thousands of ducks, and we started in Coburg Harbor, went on to Callan Pond, where we saw the snow goose, the dark phase, but there were some wood ducks, there were ring-necked ducks, and at Presqu'île were thousands and thousands of redheads, but also quite a variety of other waterfowl as well. And Roger tells me we had about 45 species of birds through the day. So it was a really, really nice day. Upcoming next week on the 3rd, we're going to do a Merlin primer, and that's going to be led by Marina. That'll be a Zoom call. So if you're interested in learning more about your Merlin app on your phone, this is an opportunity to do that. That should be fun. On the 22nd of April, we have the refuse retrieval day at Wesleyville. So if you haven't been to Wesleyville and you're curious about it, and the property, it's a great opportunity to get in there and spend some time and pick up some garbage. On early May, we haven't got the date yet set, but it should be very early May with the Spring Ephemerals outing in Brighton. So watch your email for that. Also in early May, a fledgling birder workshop. We'll hold that at Sculthorpe Marsh. And that would be for fledgling birders, people who are just starting to get interested in birding and would like to know a little bit more about it. June the 3rd, we have the Wesleyville Summer Bird Count led by Jenny Jackman. And on June the 7th and 8th, which is the same week, but on the weekend, of the Northumberland Summer Bird Count led by Roger. There are some other opportunities for outings as well, being hosted by Northumberland Land Trust on April the 12th. There's a hike at McCall Nature Reserve. May the 13th, there's the first light at Lone Pine Marsh, and that's a part of the birding marathon. June the 7th, there will be a hike at Willow Lane Nature Reserve. And on June the 10th, a moth morning at Bonnebecker Nature Reserve at 6 a.m. So if you're interested in any of those events with Northumberland Land Trust, check their website for further details. Thank you very much.
Hey, I apologize for the technical difficulties. It's put us a little bit behind time-wise, but now we're moving on to the meat of today's presentation. So I'd like to introduce you to David Hawke. So David is a well-known naturalist who combines his writing and photography to teach others about the outdoors. His weekly nature column has appeared in various media for the past 34 years. He's currently with the AureliaMatters.com. His book, Wetlands, has won the Best Book Award from the Outdoor Writers of Canada. He has been awarded the Richards Education Award from Ontario Nature and the Lorax Award from the Ontario Woodlot Association for his education programs. So, David, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and we're just going to make sure that you're coming through loud and clear. So please go ahead.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Up here, we're getting a little bit of freezing rain right now. I'm just outside of Aurelia. So I'm looking with envy at some of your sightings there, going, okay, I like what I'm seeing. Hopefully, after this weather front moves through, some of those things will be moving into here. I still have my fox sparrows out under my feeder, a couple of them. And we still have about almost a foot of snow still in the woodlot here. So I'm really looking forward to getting my own spring sightings happening rather rapidly over the next week or so. So I'm going to go to share my screen now, and we'll just see if that all happens. Let's see, there we go. Okay, does everyone see the nice title slide?
Yes.
Yep, looks good. And audio, we're coming through okay then, are we?
Yes.
Great. Okay. All right. I'm going to do this presentation on a rather unique habitat called an alvar. Some of you within the naturalist community have no doubt heard of these, and perhaps you've even had the opportunity to visit one. There's a nice collection of them out by Napanee. I'm more familiar with the ones at the Carden area, and the Manitoulin Island has these beautiful limestone areas that are indeed alvars. But a lot of people go, when I talk to them, well, I'm going out to the alvar. The reaction is, what are you talking about? What's an alvar? So outside the naturalist community, sometimes it seems to be a bit of a mystery thing. Now, why am I not forwarding? Oh, there we go. A little slow. So what I want to do tonight with this presentation is, just describe what is an alvar, where are they in Ontario? I just mentioned a few. There's actually different types of alvars, just as there's different types of wetlands, bog, swamp, fen, marsh. There are different types of alvars, so we'll address that. I'll give you an overview of some of the way cool plants and animals that are found, the flora and fauna of an alvar. It's a unique habitat, and we have unique species that are found there. And I'm going to end with a bit of a message about the threats that are posed to our alvars. It is a habitat that is, I won't say in peril yet, but it certainly has pressure on it, and they are disappearing and really nibbled away on. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit tonight as we go along as well. All right. So what the heck is an alvar? The type of habitat, just as we have wetlands, forests, prairies, an alvar is a descriptive name for a type of habitat. And an alvar is found on limestone or dolomite bedrock. Usually we just call them a limestone plain or the limestone flats. But within that, we often find we have the other components to make it an alvar. These limestone flats have very little soil. Everything from bare, it's absent, to maybe a foot, maybe 2 feet. There is very little moisture retention. So when the snow melts or it rains, we don't have a depth of soil to retain that moisture. It hits that bedrock and then just starts disappearing. So it's a rather harsh environment. The drought happens quite quickly. The flowers only have about 4 weeks to grow, bloom, get pollinated before the moisture's gone. And when you have a flood situation, that lays there fairly deep until that also gets to seep away. So I'll talk more about that in a moment. So an alvar, it is a, as I say, harsh environment, but fascinating when we get looking at it. It's fairly flat, as we can imagine when I say limestone flats. Being flat without a slope, there's that poor drainage. So if there is a little pocket anywhere, a little depression, the water stays there until it evaporates. The name itself is alvar, is Scandinavian in origin because up around the Swedish area, which we'll look at in a moment, is the other place that we can find alvars. So they're not common types of habitats at all. This is a typical view of an alvar. This is called Cameron Ranch Nature Reserve. It's on the Carden Plain, just to the east of Orillia. The Couchiching Conservancy Land Trust and Nature Conservancy of Canada have done amazing work over the last 20 years to secure and acquire these massive alvar habitats. This ranch is close to 5,000 acres. It's all contiguous, so it makes for absolutely spectacular quality of habitat for those animals and plants that want to be there. They are not fragmented. It's all continuous. It's just an amazing place to visit when you can get up there. So that's a typical view of an alvar habitat. Flat, and I have to admit, when I first started working out in this area with the land trust, my first visit was kind of boring. It's just flat, nothing going on here. But I soon learned that no, Dave, slow down, look a little closer, and totally became enchanted with the intricacies of this very special type of habitat. So I now love Alvars. They're the greatest. So where are they found? Up around the Baltic region in Europe, around Sweden, there are some limestone deposits there that are indeed alvars. But here in North America, we have a number of these alvars around the Great Lakes, especially the lower Great Lakes. Think about the Niagara Escarpment and all that limestone that's there, other deposits of limestone in the area. So about 120 sites have been identified around the Great Lakes, but most of those sites are in Ontario. So it really is kind of a source of pride that, yeah, we've got them here and let's see what's going on and let's look after them. Let's protect them the best we can. And people, well, are they rare? Well, globally, yes. As I say, there's only two places that these things show up, right in our backyard and over in Sweden. But locally, they're rare as well. When you start looking at, our wetlands and woodlands and grasslands, not to say that they're in abundance, but compared to that, alvars are minuscule in their acreage compared to the other habitats. So if we can find them, identify them, enjoy them, it is a really special place to stop in and get to know. This came from Ontario Nature. They had a booklet on alvars. As you can see, we've got the Carden Plain, basically to the north, the Napanee Plain, several limestone exposure areas there. And then once we get up on the Bruce Peninsula and on Manitoulin Island, we have a lovely assortment of these alvars that can be located there. So basically where the edge of the old sea bottom was a few 100,000 years ago, when all that limestone was being created. After the glacier went away, the water levels have changed. The land has actually sprung up again, like walking across a mattress. It's starting to come up to reform itself. And some of this limestone is exposed. And as I've been saying, we get these rather unique plant communities forming there because of the moisture and because of what's going on. And with that, we get a rather special group of birds that show up there as well, and mammals. So, as I say, we have a good number of them in the province, but they are fairly clustered. You won't just go out anywhere and find an alvar. Okay, you think you have a hard time with the word alvar? Where'd that come from? Well, once we start studying these things, we've got a few more weird names or weird sounding names that comes up, like Drake. So, and I'll show you a picture here in a moment. But a grate is an open gap in the bedrock, a crevasse, a crack. But technically they're called a grate. So if you want to sound like you're familiar with alvar, oh yeah, just the other side of the grate over there. That's where I saw the bobolink. So grates are one of the words. And then there's a clint. And a clint is the word that is the flat surface of that rock between the grapes. Kind of the place that you are. You walk on the clints and you look into the grapes as we go along. Many Alvars have pavement, and this is not asphalt pavement. These are just a huge clint or flat area with very little or usually no vegetation. It's just bare rock, many meters across. It's, it looks like pavement in a parking lot, but it's naturally formed. So you go across the clints. Some of them are big enough to be pavement to take a look at the grapes. So you have to start rolling it off your tongue to see what's going on. And then we have erratics. You may have heard of glacial erratics, that term before, but this is rock debris left from the most recent glacier. So we know that the glaciers came after this limestone bed had been laid down. So the last glacier to melt from here, the Wisconsin glacier, started melting about 10,000 or 12,000 years ago. And about 10,000 years ago, it finally disappeared, but left a lot of these big chunks of granite laying on top of the already existing limestone base. So here's a grate. And yeah, Dave, it's a crack in the rock. Well, what's so good you're talking about is a grate. But these grates, they're a world unto themselves. There are fern species, moss species that will grow in these cool crevices, cool temperature. If you lay down and listen, you can hear water running. It's an underwater or underground water system. So when it does rain and it goes into these openings, it does come out on the edge of the Alvar. And one of the problems with trying to track where the water comes from and goes to is that we can't see it. It's underground. Now on the surface, if you say, well, there's a stream over there, let's get a buffer zone around the stream, that's pretty easy. But with Alvars, we don't know exactly, did the water turn right? Did it go left? Did it drop down another meter? Very difficult, but you can hear it running when you listen into a grate. These are the clints, the flat chunks that make up the surface of this open Alvar. So these are kind of cool. It looks like dried clay mud, and basically that's what happened. But the thing is, this is limestone, and it is soluble to acid. So as we get acid rain, acid snow that melts, that actually dissolves the edges of these cracks and rounds them out and creates a deeper grate. So we do see these like a dried puddle once upon a time, but they are continuing to erode ever so slightly, but continuously because of the acidity that is found in the precipitation. And the glacial erratics, I'm standing beside a car-sized chunk of granite rock. This type of granite, it's called gneiss. This granite rock came from what we now call the Muskoka region. There was a low mountain range there, and the last glacier, as it came thundering through at its ponderously slow pace, wiped out that mountain range, crushed up all that stone into sand and gravel. But some of the big pieces were carried by the ice as it moved along, came south. And then when the glacier stopped moving and then melted, it can't pull the rocks back. They fall down as the ice softened and came down. So it is interesting to find these giant chunks of granite rock sitting on top of the Alvar. And you see right by my feet, there's a bit of pavement showing there. So that bedrock was laid down about 300,000 years ago, and the rock was dropped off about 10,000 years ago. So you get into some really interesting geological studies and awareness when you're out on an Alvar. Okay, just as I said, wetlands have, there's marshes, swamps, bogs, fens. There are different types of alvars. So we've already talked a bit about the pavement, these flat open areas. And they're usually covered with lichens, algae, and moss until a couple centuries go by. The moss gets thick enough that then you can get some little tufted hair grass starting to grow on it. But pavements, as I say, just due to their bareness, have very little vegetation showing up on them. We also have alvar grasslands. These ones here, we get our herbaceous growth, different types of grasses, different kinds of sedges. I'll talk more about sedges in a moment. So we have pavements and we have grasslands. We can also have shrubland, alvar shrubs. Usually shrubby cinquefoil, juniper, gray dogwood, fragrant sumac. These are the woody plants that some areas the soil has been allowed to build up a little bit, and these shrubs now have a place for their roots, and they're starting to establish themselves a little more widely on these alvars and become a little ecosystem unto themselves. And if there is some deeper little depressions that the soil has gathered over the years, we do have some woodland, alvar woodlands, mainly white cedar. There's also a bit of balsam fir. Um, we do have some oak, maple coming in, but the wooded alvars aren't really that common or widespread. We just haven't gone through our ecological time yet to let these things really establish. We're only, 10,000 years into it, guys. We're still on our go. So these larger trees are not well established across an alvar. So there's that pavement with the moss growing on top of it. Don't have to start with, so it's kind of laid there just like a carpet on top. You can see some of the older areas have grasses. There's enough moss that's died and regrown, or died and decomposed, and then new has regrown on it, and built up enough thatch that we do get some of the cedars starting to come in. What is interesting is when the raccoons and the black bears decide to go grub hunting, they just roll that moss back. Looks like someone in there with a flat shovel and just pushed it out of the way and rolled it up. And it takes, again, years and years and years for that moss to reestablish itself to come in. So this is why we can find still these open pavement areas, even though they have been pushed back and disturbed a bit by some of the wildlife. It takes a long time to reestablish that vegetative cover on it. You would think that this being a seabed, fossils would be common throughout, but they're not. However, there are pockets that are incredibly rich with fossils. So as you wander around, there's just, limestone, 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 and then suddenly you'll come across a scene like this, where there's all sorts of absolutely fascinating creatures that can be found in that limestone. This unfortunately has become a bit of a problem. When I was the land manager for the land trust, looking after these properties, we did have some fossil hunters come in and destroy two of the areas. Somehow word got out it was here, and they came in when nobody's looking with their hammers and chisels and busted out some of these fossils. So it's unfortunate that happened, but it's an incredible story that is revealed when you look at these pavement areas of the limestone. If there's a bit of a depression where it's still flat, but a little bit of depression that holds the water, we get a lot of sedges starting to come in here. Carex lasiocarpa in particular will dominate these areas. A little tuft of shrubs here and there, but by and large, a large grassland area really unique butterfly and dragonfly habitat is created here. When we do our dragonfly and butterfly counts, it is really cool to see some of the things we get, but we'll only get them here, just in this Alvar grassland. They're not found in other places of the geographic area. So grasslands, a lot of sedges come into play here. And then we also have, say, these shrublands. Juniper, which we see in the foreground. Just behind it, we can see a few hawthorn trees, a few gray dogwood have been starting in. These shrubs are a bit of a concern right now because they are at their ecological time to dominate. We have succession, natural succession, when one plant community succeeds over another and changes it. And we're noticing that these shrubs have, in the last 50 years or so, really started to make them known. As they do so, they are compromising the grassy areas, some of the open areas. So birds like bobolink and meadowlark are kind of losing their habitat. But then we're getting all sorts of warblers and loggerhead shrike coming in with the hawthorn trees. So it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on to see what's going on out there with these shrublands. As I say, the woodland areas, it's not extensive trees out there, but we do have these clusters where we get a lot of white cedar, in particular white elm or American elm grows sporadically through the area. Some beautiful big elms can still be seen in this area. The beetles that carry the white pine or the Dutch elm disease have not found these elm trees, so they're just magnificent. You drive down the road or walk down the trail, you can see all around you. I kind of say it's like watching giraffes walk across the horizon, so to speak. These beautiful big singular or solitary white elms that can be found. So I'm sure you've heard of other limestone formations, such as an escarpment. You know, we talk about the Bruce Peninsula and the Niagara Escarpment. That's all limestone. Why isn't that an Alvar? Well, the escarpments are comprised mainly of cliffs and bluffs. We have talus or broken slopes, whereas Alvars are flat and kind of prairie-like when you first look at them. So same material, that limestone base, but we do notice that the physiology is different, and therefore the Alvars are not as common as perhaps the more well-known Bruce Peninsula, or if you walk along the Bruce Trail, or if you're down around Crawford Lake, you'll see these giant limestone cliffs, but they're not Alvars. They don't have the same plant community at all. And if you know your wetlands, you realize we also have fens in southern Ontario, not too many, but they are on the flat limestone area. The difference between a fen and an alvar is not quite as different as that of the escarpment, but fens are wet. They're a type of wetland, ankle deep, generally with wet water. They often have a soft bottom, kind of a clay muck on the bottom of them. Whereas alvars, they totally dry out in the summer. There's not much water coming into it. And they're on that hard limestone bedrock and not a soft clay or marl bottom to them. So the whole escarpment area has all these different types of limestone formations and presentations. And we have to realize that the alvar type is quite unique. And when you do find an alvar, it's like, yeah, check this out. The floor, because it's a unique habitat, we have rather unique species list that's there. Up in the Carden Alvar and on Manitoulin, lists have been put together. And we found that there are 54 plant species that grow only in an alvar. I'm going to show you a few of these as we go along here. Other plants can grow in other places too, kinda, if they have to, I guess, but they prefer an alvar. But we have well over 50 that are very specific. There's mosses, sedges, herbaceous plants that really need these specific habitats if they're going to survive. Now, an alvar plant, because the weather, as I say, is very harsh, it's either flooded or it's dried out. So most of these plants, especially our grasses and the sedges, are what we call tufted. Several stems come out of a very tight cluster on the base. And if it rains or there's heavy dew, all that moisture runs down the stems into a common root base that plant can utilize when everything starts to dry out around it. So we have this tufted growth. They're often hairy as well, or fuzzy on their stems. Again, that helps restrict heat loss or moisture loss. And so you get these very fuzzy stems when you start checking things out. They are drought resistant. They have the ability to kind of stop growth if they have to until things get wet again. So it's kind of a start-stop growing season for some of them. And a lot of them also are flood resistant. We get, as I say, these big pockets like the sedge meadow. They have to be able to hang on until things dry out enough that they can put up their shoots and put out their flowers. So the more you study this list of flora, you start really like, wow, that's how they survive, because other plants couldn't. White trillium could not survive in an alvar. It just couldn't do it. So these things are quite specific. The other thing to appreciate about the flora, there's a very short growing season. It's about 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So it sits there, the snow melts. In April, things start to soften up a bit, start to grow a bit. May, things start really kicking in. The floodwaters have gone away. It's dried out enough that these plants can grow. And by the last week of May, first week of June, it's just a botanical garden out there. And by the time you get to the third week of June, everything's brown. The plants have done their bloom, hopefully created their seeds, and then the rest of the year is just really grasses and shrubs. So to see the flowers, you really have to plan that visit around that late May, early June time of year. Okay, so some of the things that can be found out there. This blob in the middle of the screen here is a type of algae. It's called nostoc algae, and it sits there. However, I've talked with a couple of professors who have done a lot of research on this, and they think this algae was the first life form to kind of emerge out of the seas and come up onto land. It started microscopically, started gathering nutrients, created this mass that over millions of years finally turned into mosses, algae, mosses, plants. So this is common on the alvar. We still have this nostoc algae. So it's a big gooey mess when it's wet, but when it dries out, it's like parchment. It just looks like a dried out cow patty sitting out there. Yet when it gets wet again next spring after the snow melt, it has that lovely green texture again. So here we see the beginning of life on our planet captured on the top of this limestone, this very old seabed that this stuff grows on. So I always found that interesting when I can find a patch of this algae. It's older than the dinosaurs. It's pretty cool stuff. This is the namesake for a lot of the alvar areas. This is one of the avens. It's called prairie smoke. And those long filaments we see there are not the bloom. This is it actually gone to seed. The flower itself, lovely little yellow petals, but once it's pollinated, it has these big long plumes that the seeds are attached to, and the whole area just looks like mist or ground smoke on the area, and hence the name prairie smoke. And you can find it in a few other places, but 90% of the prairie smoke will be found on an alvar in Ontario. Yeah, when this stuff gets going, and this is so again, the blooming is mid-May. That first week of June, it's starting to set seed. So for a week, week and a half, this is the scene you see, and it's everywhere, down the roadsides, across the fields. Just a really special plant to have a look at, this prairie smoke. The Carden Field Naturalist Club, this is their logo. This is, you have the Wimbrel, they have the prairie smoke flowerhead as their logo. Scarlet cup is very common out there. That scarlet kind of orange color to it. It's very closely related to poinsettias, actually. And if we look closely at the screen, if my mouse does show up, you can see there's pistils and anthers and stamens. And the big orange part is really just a sepal. It's a billboard to attract moths to come by and seek the nectar and do the cross-pollination. But scarlet cup, again, some years the whole just turns orange, acres and acres of it. And what is interesting, I've found with a lot of these, is that you will have a year when it's just super abundant, but it seems to exhaust itself. And the next year there'll just be a patch here and a patch there. And it might be on a 5 or 7 year cycle before this, landscape covered with a particular species. But when it happens, wow, sit there and say, is this even possible here in Ontario to see something like this? Just so special when you trip over it. A little bit of prairie smoke in the foreground. Hairy beard tongue, again, doesn't grow in those big dense stands, but it's commonly scattered through the area. You can see that fuzziness or hairiness to the stem, which is a common characteristic to most of these alvar plants, in that it does stop the sun from just burning the moisture off, and it can actually retain the moisture a little bit longer and survive, or let that plant survive because of that fuzzy texture to it. This is one of my favorite alvar wildflowers. I love botany, but this one's cool. Before I saw an actual plant, I'd only seen drawings and pictures and some close-up photos of Seneca snakeroot. And I figured this thing would be like, knee high and, right out where I could see it like a lupin. But no, a tall one is ankle high. These are very tiny plants growing in a little tuft or cluster. But the white is just spectacular. The shape, like a rattlesnake tail, they call it snake root. And when these come out, they're not that easy to find. So when you do trip over one, it's like, whoa, let's just take a moment here and really appreciate it. They're not common, and outside of an alvar, you can rarely find them. As the stats say, about 85% of their population will be found somewhere on an alvar. Nearly vervain, I mean, you really got to be into plants, wildflowers to appreciate some of these. I agree with that. But when you see this growing right on the edge of the trail or as you walk along, you realize that's not, blue vein. What the heck is that? And you look close and you'll see all the characteristics of narrow-leaved vervain. And this one does grow about knee high, so you can see it as you go along. But again, another plant that's a special find when you're walking these trails on this site. Finishing up with the plants, this little sedge, again, never more than ankle high, what's called Crow's sedge. You can see how it's rooted itself down into these tiny little cracks in the limestone. It is fairly common until it gets shaded out by, say, a juniper comes in and starts, the branches come out. It may interfere with this sedge, but you will not find a Crow's sedge anywhere except on an Alvar. So this is one of those ones that, big excitement when you're out on your field trip. You go, yes, here it is. It proves that we are indeed on the Alvar. The mixture there, I just had to throw in a couple of these overall pictures. It is a garden. It's just an incredible natural garden when you go by. Even the roses out there, when they come into bloom, these shrubs, it's just like walking through a florist shop. It's just absolutely stunning. And we also have some of the Canada anemone in this picture. So it's we do have both native and non-native plants out there. The common mullein, the big tall one, is non-native, making itself known out there. But the purple one, the bergamot, is native. The St. John's worts are native, but the blue weed is also non-native. So it's very difficult actually to find an Alvar that is pure Alvar, because most of these non-native plants are aggressive to the point that when their seeds get out there, they'll just go, and they're very adaptable to whatever habitat they get into. So you have to look a little close sometimes. Is it truly an Alvar plant, or is it somebody just moved into the area? Now, as far as the birds go, there's a lot of interest from the birders to come to this area, because we do have a lot of rare ones that make an Alvar their home. So the loggerhead shrike, Henslow sparrow, bobolinks and meadowlarks are fairly common. Barn swallows are still hanging in. Whippoorwills are in the area. So this is quite a draw for naturalists, bird watchers, to come and try to see these birds. And oftentimes they get lucky. Henslows, not so much, but once every 8 years, somebody will trip over one. But we do think they're holding their own in some of the quiet back areas on the Alvar. There are species of concern as well. The nighthawks, golden wing warblers are moving into those shrub areas. If we get some cedar poplar mix, we're getting the golden wings showing up. And others commonly found there, but not common everywhere else. Wilson snipe, upland sandpipers, bluebirds. Bluebirds are super common out there, thanks in a big part to the nest box trails that the Naturalist Club have put out. Sandhill cranes have been moving into this area quite readily, and things like clay-colored sparrow. It's just the checklist, you just have it out all the time when you're out on the trail. There's lots happening there. So the loggerhead shrike, Napanee, on Carden Plains, there's been a lot of work done by Wildlife Habitat Canada to study shrikes, and actually they have captive breeding pairs of shrikes at the Toronto Zoo and the African Lion Safari, and the young birds are brought out, climatized to these areas in these big cages that are way out by themselves, and these young shrike are then released, hoping that they will come back and get the population coming up again. Unfortunately, it hasn't been working. They have released hundreds of young fledgling shrikes, and they banned them, so they're easy to tell kind of like the Canada Jays in Algonquin Park. They have colored leg bands, and they don't see them coming back. So we're not too sure what's going on. We do know the loggerhead shrike population is healthy down in the northeastern states, but whatever's going on with the Napanee Plain and the Carden Plain, the shrikes, even though there's hawthorn trees there, there's food for them. And this grasshopper we see impaled on a hawthorn, that's typical shrike hunting. Their nickname is butcher bird, where they'll stick a garter snake or a grasshopper or a mouse on a thorn or a barbed wire fence and store it there and come back later and eat it. So all the habitat components are there, the food, the shelter, but for some reason the loggerheads are not sticking around. Their population is gone. When I first started there, we had like 28 pair, and now they're down to about 2 pair that are out there. That's since 2012. So something's going on with our loggerhead shrikes. Bobolinks, love those areas, fairly common out there. There's been a lot of work to maintain the habitat for bobolink and for meadowlark. But again, as you well know, I'm sure as naturalists, it's getting more difficult to find these habitat sites for a bobolink. They're out there. They're still hanging in. Sandhill cranes have been moving in good numbers lately, which is good to see. Whatever's going on continentally with their population, we're seeing more and more sandhills. They're breeding there now. We've seen the colts, the little brown guys wandering around in the grasses. So we know the sandhills have established themselves on the Carden Plain. Upland sandpipers, there's a couple roads on the Carden area. One's called Alvar Road. You just drive down it, and every fence post, it seems, has an upland sandpiper sitting on it. So again, for photographers and bird watching or bird watchers, it's pretty cool to get up close views of what usually is a hard to find bird. But the upland sandpipers are very common in these grass areas. As is the snipe. These guys, I don't know, they just love to pose. You go down the road, you roll the window down the car, you're on the trail, you start, sneaking down the trail, and just sits there and looks at you. Oh, you got my right side? Should I turn around? You want my left side? They do have a limit, but it is a pretty cool place to get really good views of these types of birds. The sparrows, there's clay-colored Vesper sparrows, all sorts of things going on out there. Clay-coloreds are very difficult to find. And a lot of these birds, you got to first locate them by sound, by their song. Therefore, your Merlin app comes in handy. My ears, unfortunately, do not work. I cannot hear a sparrow. I can't even hear a winter wren, which is terrible. But for those who go seeking these birds, especially in early June, they're there. And every now and then they'll present themselves. And when I have my camera, I can get a quick shot. Because the properties out there are large acreages, it takes a lot of land to get enough grazing to have your cattle survive. And ranching is the biggest activity going on these days on the Alvars. Because the properties are 500 acres, 800 acres, 1,200 acres, with nothing on it, there's no barns, there's no houses, we get mammals that like those big open areas will hang out there. Historically, back in the early 1700s, elk were in this area. Now we have, the big ones need a lot of bear, moose, bobcat, and we have some other common ones as well. So there are a lot of black bears out here. This is me having a steering contest with one on the trail. I won, he wandered away. Then I ran like hell back to the car. But there are a lot of black bears out there. because they have this huge unfettered area that they can do their thing. They can live like a real black bear without interference by a lot of other of our agricultural activities. One thing I was amazed with when I go out in the wintertime are the tracks of the ermine or short-tailed weasel. I get into one of those cedar tree thickets and it's just packed flat with tracks from the ermine. So there's a huge population of them surviving out there, feeding on everything from the sparrows to the ruffed grouse that can be found in the area, and lots of meadow voles. So this is one animal that surprised me with its abundance. I only got to see a couple of them eye to eye, but man, their tracks were everywhere as they're hunting those areas. And surprisingly, a lot of porcupines like to be on these limestone areas. I always think of porcupines being in the sugar bush or there's a big old hollow tree they can get into. But those grikes, and some of them are fairly big, the grikes become shelter for porcupines. They will live in a grike, one of those cracks in the limestone, especially in the wintertime. You see they come out, they will climb whatever trees around, but the trees aren't old enough or big enough to be hollow. So these guys will just utilize them to climb up, get a meal, and they'll go back down into their den down in the rocks. Again, I've found in the wintertime tracks of the bobcat. The locals call one of the gullies out there Bobcat Swamp. So we know that for many generations, human generations, they have noted bobcat in the area. Again, for me, that's just so special because where else are you going to go to find bobcat habitat still in southern Ontario? So they're there as well, feeding on the snowshoe hare in particular. So it is kind of neat to know that that's their neck of the woods. We also have a lot of invertebrates out there, butterflies, moths. Again, some of these are associated with the rare plants. We have the one of the dusky wings that feeds on the New England tea, or New Jersey tea, sorry, narrowleaf New Jersey tea, which grows there. So we have this cool relationship between a rare plant and a very rare moth that can be found out there. We do our dragonfly count. I love these guys. They're called a Halloween pennant, fairly common in this area. I have seen them occasionally other places, but these wet sedge meadows are a great place to find these. If you're out there in July, you've missed the peak birding season, but in July there's a huge number of dragonflies and damselflies that live in that area. This little guy here is an inornate ringlet. The caterpillars feed on sedges. And as I say, the Carex lasiocarpa is very common out there. And hence, these little ringlets are quite common in those grassy areas. Kind of finish up, so I've talked about how great and glorious these habitats are. But of course, in this day and age, there's always got to be a negative message, I guess, that goes with it. But the biggest threats right now are quarries taking the limestone and utilizing it. What was an Alvar and then becomes through a rock crusher, gravel for your laneway. We also have invasive species like dog strangling vine, DSV, shrubby cinquefoil, juniper, as I said a moment ago, exploding, taking over some of those grassy areas. So we have a couple threats happening there. We're finding that the ATV and 4x4 truck crowd have discovered these areas. Because they're big, once they get through one fence, then they can go for acres and acres and acres. Trying to get in front of these guys is a challenge. They're arrogant, they're bold, and they make one hell of a mess when they get in there. The other problem we have, and it's our own making, we, the conservation groups, have acquired this land, advertised it as a nature reserve, just as I've done here tonight. Hey, you got to come and see this. So people are coming to see it. And we are getting overwhelmed by the photographers, the bird watchers, the fossil hunters, the fern thieves, the turtle snatchers. It's become a real challenge to manage the people when you're trying to manage the landscape. So all surrounding these protected lands are very active quarries, and this land has been bought up by these companies for long-term holding. They know they won't need it for another 80 to 100 years, but they own it now. And the threat is that sooner or later, they're going to be, blasting it and, taking that limestone out as gravel. What has happened recently is that through a lot of effort between the aggregate community and the conservation community, we've sat down, we've talked, and rather than throwing stones at each other, we decided to shake hands and see what we can do here. So, as I say, a lot of the land holding is owned by aggregate company, but they're not going to use it for 100 years, if at all. So in the meantime, guys, can we see what we can do to, keep the bobolinks going in there, keep the Blandings turtle in the pond, and actually the aggregate industry, because they want to look good. They're smart. They don't want to be the bad guy all the time. They are now donating both land and money to conservation groups to help us continue with some of the conservation efforts we're doing. One company just donated 500 acres to the Couchiching Conservancy because they think, you know what, we're not really, we bought it because it was there years ago. Why don't we give it to you guys? So nature wins and they look good because they've donated it to a conservation group. And we all use gravel. We can't say these are bad guys. We all put the demand out there. We need concrete, we need gravel, and the limestone's there. The industry exists, and we have to kind of get along with that. Dog strangling vine has really stepped through these open limestone areas. I'm sure you're familiar with DSV. It comes in, there's 1 or 2 plants, and then there's 20 or 30 plants, then there's an acre, and then there's 50 acres of it. We have spent a lot of time trying to knock it back. We know we can't get rid of it, but can we control its spread? Can we keep it out of the really sensitive alvar areas? And it takes a lot of effort to do that. So this is one of the threats to the quality of the alvar. And I mentioned these shrubs again. We're having some trouble retaining the grassland areas. The shrubs are there. They have every right to be there, but they are now changing that grassy area where the more endangered birds happen to live. So it's a dilemma. Leave it alone, let nature take its course, or step in and try and do some diversionary tactics to try to keep the grasslands as grasslands. People. As soon as we started advertising that it was a bird watcher or a photographer's paradise, this is the main road that goes through a single lane, and there is still a lot of ranching that goes on, both on the conservation lands and on the nearby ranches. And when you're a rancher and you're coming down there and you've got your water tank for the cattle or food coming in or checking it, and this is in front of you, it is frustrating. And we get a lot of complaints from the ranchers. Get these people off the road. I can't maintain my ranch. I can't look after my cattle because a lot of these people, they won't get off the road. They just stand there, and they don't get it that the rancher is really trying to look after their cattle. ATVs, 4x4 trucks into this area. The branch on the left was a road allowance, and they've been using that for years. Some beavers came in and put a dam across it. So what the ATV guys did is they tried to go around the pond and made more tracks, and then the beavers flooded that as well. So this used to be lovely grassland and shrubland Alvar, and it's now all ripped up. You can see in the foreground there some of the exposed limestone. So again, it's a challenge. How do you deal with people who want to enjoy the great outdoors, but in a different way than I would enjoy the great outdoors? So just to kind of wrap up, how do we manage it? We need to control the access by people. We have to keep the cattle there grazing to keep the shrike and the bobolink habitat consistent. We may have to do some shrub removals, but if we can protect it as conservation land, it's great. So for the bird watchers, we put these information boards up. Just, especially if you're new to birding or new to the area, we built parking lots where you can pull off that single lane road. Some information here, just you're in a special area and you can't just get out of your car and wander away. You've got to put it in a parking area and keep that roadway clear, and don't hassle the birds. Enjoy them for where they are. The cattle grazing is critical to the maintenance of these areas to keep the grasslands open. Without the cattle, it would very quickly come in with so many other plants. The upland sandpiper, the meadowlarks, the bobolinks would lose their critical habitat. So as a conservation measure, we work very closely with the ranchers to keep the cattle on the land, as has been done for generations, and trying to hold that Alvar habitat in the best we can. We do keep the cattle out of the streams now. We put in these solar-powered water pumps. Great expense. They're really fussy. This is one of the things when that rancher's driving down the road, he wants to make sure that the pump's still working, but it keeps the cattle out of the wet areas. And an agreement we came to, we can't have the cattle mucking up the wet areas. And we are in places removing the junipers and some of the cedar trees, trying to get these big open areas again. We reseed it with little blue stem, one of the grasses that's native to the area. Measured success, if I can put it that way. Doesn't always work as well as we want, but we are, the collective we, are retaining some of that grassland and actually improving it, rehabbing it a bit. And the dog strangling vine, we have an army of volunteers that come out picking the pods. Every year we have all the patches mapped, GPSed, and we also apply chemical on some of these areas. The pod picking is great. We fill bags and bags with pods, but it doesn't kill the plant. So in some areas where it's getting close to some really critical areas, we actually do apply chemical very carefully to keep that dog strangling vine in check in some areas. And we work with the aggregate community. This ranch here is the Bluebird Ranch, was purchased. Over half the money came from the aggregate community. The lady in the orange shirt, blouse, was president of the Ontario aggregate group, and they had arranged for thousands of dollars to come to the Couchiching Conservancy to buy this property to protect it forever as habitat. So our partnerships are working in that manner. Lake Simcoe and the center of Lake really is right in the middle. The yellow area is the Carden Alvar Plain. the brown areas are all the limestone alvar with dead grass on it at the moment. But this is where this cluster of Alvars is located, just east of Aurelia. The Couchiching Conservancy does have trail maps for the area. You can go to their website, you can download it, and they've actually acquired even more property since this map's here. That whole area around this Digby area is now also conservation land. You can't go on all of it because we do have cattle in there. We do have very rare birds nesting. So you're on the road system, and we do have a few trails that you're most welcome to walk on. But I'll say, unfortunately, you can't just jump out of your car and walk for 5,000 acres. You will be disturbing rare nesting birds and perhaps even the cattle. So it's somewhat limited in access, but it's there. You can get to see it, and it's so abundant it just kind of spills over onto the roadways and onto the trails anyhow. So if you're interested in going there, download this brochure ahead of time from the Couchiching Conservancy Land Trust. So Alvar habitats, what the heck is that? Now you know, guys. Hopefully that helps out a little bit. So I'm going to stop sharing at this point, and if we have any chat or questions, I'd be delighted to try and answer anything that we may have time for.
Great, thanks, David. Let me just apply. So if there's anybody on Zoom that has questions, you can either unmute yourself or type your question in the chat. And anybody in the room have any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any areas around that either we could visit? You're saying there's Alvars.
Did you hear that, David, or should I repeat it?
No, it's a little garlic. If you could repeat it, that'd be...
Areas around Napanee. So there's Alvars down there. Are there any areas there that we should visit as well?
Yeah, there are. I'm personally not that familiar with the area, but yes, if you check in with Ontario Nature, they have fabulous information on Ontario Alvars, and they could let you know where you could enter some of those areas. Same with Manitoulin Island. Sometimes you just drive down the road and there it is. But they have nature reserves there as well. So check in with the local land trust or through Ontario Nature. I'm sure they could get you to the right place at the right time.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Another question, go ahead.
Any cattle that have a symbiotic relationship with these Alvars? Is there any other animal?
Is it mainly cattle that have a symbiotic relationship with the Alvars, or are there other animals and or crops that might do that?
The cattle, it's an interesting history because it was mainly grassland, open area. European settlement, came in heavily, around the early 1800s, 1830, 1850. And this area was definitely not prime agricultural land. Everybody knew that. So the land was cheap, and those that felt they could get to it realized they needed, as I said earlier, 500 acres, 1,000 acres. So there'd be enough grass that their cattle could actually eat it and be able to be fat enough, so to speak, to harvest. So the cattle came in. Prior to that, it was elk and white-tailed deer. But the cattle came in, and pros and cons to the cattle. On the one hand, they did, through their grazing, kept it in check, kept it going good. But also the downside was many ranchers through the 1930s, 1950s tried to enhance that grassland by introducing alfalfa, birdfoot trefoil, Timothy hay, and some areas have caught with that. And we're seeing, as I said earlier, we're getting all sorts of strange plants, non-alvar plants growing there. And a lot of them came in with cattle feed. And we're also finding that the cattle manure, sometimes these beasts are fed hay bales. Late summer, there's not much to eat out there at all. So the rancher will buy hay bales from somewhere else, bring them out, put them out for the cattle to eat. And they contain seeds, Queen Anne's lace, Viper's bug gloss, mullein, all sorts of things are in it. So the plus is the cattle kept it in pretty good shape. The downside is the management techniques allowed these non-native plants to come into the area. The other animals there, it's just nature. The bears are there, surviving quite well. The deer are there, but there's no other, like there's no horses out there. There's never been really horse ranching. There's no sheep grazing out there. It's mainly beef cattle. And it's one of the concerns when the conservation groups started buying up this land, the ranchers thought it was going to be the end of them until they found out that no, we want you to keep your cattle on the land, even if it is now conservation land. So I'm not sure if my long-winded answer nails your question, but there is a very, very good relationship between the cattle being there and trying to manage the health of the Alvar.
Thanks, David. Any other questions? Okay, another question?
What used to prescribe burns as a management tool in the prairies around here? Do you ever use that on the Alvar?
Question about prescribed burns. Do you ever use those on the Alvar?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, so it's a good point. Sometimes you can kickstart a habitat by having a good old fire. And on true prairies, fire is used as a management tool. Oak savannas, a controlled fire is used. We thought on the Alvar, why don't we try that? And at great cost and time, we fenced off a 10-acre square and we set fire to it. Easy to say, but it was a highly focused effort. And we found that the fire moved very quickly across the landscape. We did it in April, just after the snow melted, but before the green growth came up. We were trying to get the shrubs burnt back to see if we could open it up. And the fire did move quickly, but it moved too quickly because there was very little fuel. There's only a little thin layer of these grasses, as is typical on an Alvar. We couldn't get enough heat to actually kill the hawthorn or kill the shrubs that were there. So we made a lot of smoke, but we didn't really get a result that we were happy with. There has been 2 major fires that have swept through the Carden one. One in 1886, I think it was. It started up near Washago. It was in September. It was a drought year, and it came from sparks off a train, and the entire area burned off very quickly because it was all dry grass and the wind carried it all over the place. We had one family that died. They put their kids in the well, hoping that the fire would sweep by, and unfortunately, 4 kids suffocated in that well as the oxygen was sucked out. The rail fences were all burned down. The log houses, wood houses disappeared. It was devastating. It was a real mess. And in 1947, another fire came through again in September, another drought year, and everybody was scrambling to take down the rail fences, to get them out of the way. cattle be damned. We'll figure them out later. Trying to not put it out, but get out of the way. How can we save so we don't lose everything to fire again? So it again was a big event in the 1940s. But other than that, fire we found is not a very good management tool to be applied to an Alvar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions from the room, none on Zoom. David, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. It's interesting timing because our outings committee met a few weeks ago and we were planning our outings. And one of the things that made our list as a possible outing was going to Cardin Alvar. So you have probably amped up the interest in an outing like that. So we'll have to see if we get that moving this year.
Very good. All right, good to hear.
Well, thank you very much. We are just going to close the meeting now. I just got a couple of updates. I'm just going to switch back to my slides. But again, thank you, David, very much.
All right, you're most welcome. Nice to see you guys. Excellent. Maybe we'll cross paths out in the Alvar. Thank you.
All right, next meeting, please note the date. It's May 2nd. We don't have access to this room on the last Friday of April. So we've booked the following Friday, which is May 2nd. That meeting will be, our speaker will be Don Scallon. He'll be talking about Turtles of Ontario. And Don, whenever he speaks, he collects for turtle charities. So bring your wallet, bring your purse. Don will be collecting. Don will be here in person and will be collecting for a local turtle charity. The last meeting before we take a short break for the summer is going to be May 30th, which will be a member photography showcase night. If you remember last year, we did that for the first time and we got some positive feedback from that. So we'll be doing that again this year. So I just want to give people who would like to participate again the heads up that that's coming. At the beginning of May, I will send out the information on how to submit your photographs for the showcase. But just give it some thought. We'll be looking for Northumberland County photographs. And the next meeting is next Thursday, April 3rd. It's going to be a Zoom meeting. Richard mentioned it when he was going over the outing. So this is an indoor outing. If you'd like to participate. Last year we did a similar webinar where we covered Merlin, iNaturalist, and eBird, but we just went at a high level on each of those tools. This one in particular is going to be a deeper dive into Merlin and the website All About Birds, which is a great tool. Merlin has had some updates to Cornell has updated Merlin since in the last year, so there are some new there's a new look to it, some new functionality. So we're going to dig a bit deeper into Merlin, get people more familiar with it. You don't have to have ever used it before to participate. You just need to join the Zoom and we'll go through it. So hopefully I'll see some of you people on next Thursday. So if there's no questions or comments from anybody, apologize again for the technical difficulties. Get home safely. Have a good night. Thank you.